Hi, I'm Michael Hartman,
I'm Naomi Liu.
And I'm Mike Rizzo, and this is OpsCast,
a podcast for marketing ops pros.
and Rev Ops pros.
Created by the Mo Pros, the #1 community for marketing operations professionals.
Tune in to each episode as we chat with real professionals to help elevate you in your marketing operations career.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of OpsCast, brought to you by marketingops.com, powered by the Mo Pros. Joined today with my co-host, Mike Rizzo. Early for him.
Yeah.
Early-ish.
Early-ish. I mean, it's 9 a.m. I'm awake. My kids got me up at 5:50, I think.
All right. Well, and then on the other end of the spectrum, our guest today is going to help us talk about the idea of a maturity model for marketing ops and the skills for MoPros to have to kind of bring that to life is Simon Daniels, joining us from the UK. He is currently a principal analyst for marketing operations strategies at Forrester, where he does research and delivers guidance and advice to clients. Prior to joining Forrester, he held several marketing operations leadership roles, both in-house and as a consultant. He also has co-hosted another podcast about marketing ops called What's MOps Got to Do with It? Simon, thanks for joining us and welcome. And
Thank you so much.
Thanks for staying on late on a Friday.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for having me. I've got a cup of tea going here, so it's all good. Great to talk to you, Michael, and again, Mike. And sad no Naomi. I'll have to look forward to getting a chance to talk to her one of these days in the future.
Yeah, well, we were missing her. She's got some stuff going on, so it's tough for her to fit this in.
Sure.
Yep. Well, good. So, Simon, thanks. I feel like I'm gonna be saying this on all of our upcoming episodes because I've been so swamped. I have not done a good job of getting these scheduled. But thank you for your patience in getting this scheduled. I know we've talked about it for a while.
Yeah.
But I do want to get into the maturity model conversation. And so we can maybe figure out how we want to do this. But when you think about that, I'm assuming there's some skills that you're assuming are needed for people to be in marketing ops and things like that. What are some of those things that you see that are needed for a really top-notch marketing ops team or department or professional?
Right. Well, yeah, and the maturity model, in some ways, or that concept, speaks to some of the aspects of the skills and so on that go into a MoPro. What we see, though, as being needed for a marketing operations function and the individuals are really, first of all, executives level support. Without that, you can have a function or a team or a role and people doing those jobs, but if they don't have the real air cover and backing, then it's really tough to progress up that maturity scale to really be an effective marketing operations function. So that's certainly crucial. And then with that is a strategic remit. Again, this speaks to the maturity concept that which we can come on to, but it needs to be more than just executing and building and configuring. It needs to be very much at the table, involved in the thinking, the direction, where are things going, and that's what really makes for a successful marketing operations function. With that, a concept that the roles within a marketing operations function are careers and not just jobs. They've got a path, and we might even come back to that in terms of what the ultimate endpoint for a marketing operations professional is. And then
we come back to that. I'm super excited about that one.
Yes,
sure,
sorry,
absolutely.
Going.
Me too. No, I like that one as well. And then, I mean, it's almost a truism, but just development opportunities. So, obvious things like training, continual opportunities for enhancing the skills across the spectrum of marketing operations activities. But things like also memberships. So, signing up for marketingops.com so that there's a sense of support. And that again, it's a profession, and not that not that it isn't, but there should be a sense that the marketing ops Slack channel is work safe, and rather than somebody looking over another person's shoulder and saying, well, what are you doing in that Slack channel? What are why aren't you building the campaign that's going out tomorrow? It would be literally, oh, great, I see you're educating yourself or checking in with other people in the community, getting other input and so on. And it's that kind of support that is, makes the difference between, is it something that you're just having to do by yourself, or is it really supported and understood by, the wider organization? The time to experiment and try things out, again, there should be time to just try all the new stuff out, whether it's AI or looking at aspects of the metaverse or any of the other, keywords and topics and trends and so on. It could be a complete waste of time, but it's important to be on top of that stuff and have an understanding for it, and that needs to be understood. And then the chance to do this kind of thing. Maybe if you're a marketing operations professional, doing a podcast, writing a blog for somebody should be part and parcel of the role, and that should be seen and recognized. And then I think collaboration, outside of marketing operations and marketing is again crucial, and that speaks to some of the other things that perhaps we'll come on to. So in summary, a marketing operations professional needs to be insight driven, a design thinker, and tech savvy, and put all that together, and I think you've got a good combination.
I think it's the first thing you talked about was executive support. I want to come back to that in a second, but I want to touch on the point about having time to experiment and learn, try new things that maybe are not core. I think is one of the things that's really hard to fit into. At the same time, I know that and like you probably had this too, like I get asked all the time about those things from other people in marketing and others, because they're also hearing about it. Yeah. So I think it's valuable not only to learn, but also just to be able to have a perspective or an opinion, if you will, on whether or not something like that makes sense for where your organization is. Yeah. I'm just one follow-up on the follow-up question on the executive support. When you say executive support, I think my mind immediately goes to, whatever your title, the top marketer is at the organization is that. But what about beyond that, right? Sales or operate like COO, CEO level? Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think, you're absolutely right. I kind of meant the CMO or the most senior marketing decision maker or leader. But yeah, the entire C-suite, it's important to have that support. And, that comes back to the collaboration piece, because marketing operations should be collaborating with sales operations, and certainly when I've been a practitioner, almost the first thing I do in a role is to look for the head of sales ops and make that connection, and that's great and to be encouraged. At the same time, it shouldn't be just down to those individuals to connect. The CMO should be saying to the head of marketing operations, I am going to introduce you to the head of sales ops, and the CSO or head of sales should be doing the same in reverse and creating that collaboration. So yeah, absolutely, that needs to span across. And thinking in terms of the wider collaboration and the wider set of stakeholders that marketing operations have across finance and IT and so on, then those leaders should be looking to make those connections and build those relationships in just the same way that the MOPS Pro is as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a thread there that I think we'll end up coming back to later, so I don't want to go there yet. But so let's you kind of laid some foundation here. Let's get into this maturity model, because I think there's one of the things I know in fact, I had a call with a mentee yesterday about kind of thinking about how do you think about how to structure or think about it, marketing ops, when you're talking to your executives or your other teams, or if you're managing a team trying to build out here's the gaps that we have. So I'm assuming you're going to get into some of that. So what is your maturity model thought process on that?
Yeah, so we have what we call the Forrester revenue operations or marketing operations, if you like, range of responsibilities model, and essentially that spans a core set of elements of marketing operations. We call them priorities. So planning, process, tech, data, measurement. So the things that you would think of, yeah, that's marketing operations. And then, so that's the sort of the span of it. And then what you have is a dimension within each of those, essentially from tactical to strategic. And that's what describes the maturity in each of those elements. So like I kind of alluded to, at the tactical level, it's just essentially doing, and then you rise up to end at strategic, where it's much more driving and I suppose I don't want to say directing, but working with the rest of a marketing leadership team and the CMO or marketing leader to be figuring out how is everything fitting together, not waiting to be told, but putting forward suggestions for perhaps a new piece of technology to address a problem that has been identified, or obviously proactively governing data to make sure that it's fit for purpose, building out measurement and looking for ways to do that better, so that marketing and the business knows the benefit that marketing is delivering and the return on investment ultimately that's coming to that. So that's essentially what describes the overall maturity, if you like.
Super, super interesting and very helpful to hear from your perspective, for sure. One of the things we're working on with a group of board members, effectively, so community members that we pulled in across sort of a range of backgrounds, is what does it really mean to be a certified marketing operations professional? And some of this is exactly no surprise, right? Once you've been around a while, certainly the things that we're talking about as well. Trying to figure out, are there levels of certification, or is there some sort of like overarching theme that you can sort of pull in? And one of the things that came out of that conversation at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, that I sort of defined as what I would call like a universal truth when it comes to marketing operations, is that in my mind, all things in marketing operations have a strategy component. So like there's very rarely a time where you're going to just do something without first thinking about the implications of what's about to happen.
I would hope so, yeah.
I just don't know. So when we talk about like some of these core principles of what might be, what might go into a certification program, or just even a maturity model, right? You're talking about tactical to strategic. The execution work, I mean, you can be told what to do, yes. Like, here's the list, hit send, right?
Yeah.
Like that requires nothing other than you're now doing whatever someone told you to do. But if you're being told to send an email to the database, there is some level of strategy that should go through your mind, even if it's like, how do I pull the list, right?
Yeah.
How do I make sure they're opted in and all these other things? And so,
do you think it's strategy? Because to me, that there's sort of an intermediate level, which I would call just understanding the context.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard. Like, I don't know what a better word is for it.
No, I know. I'm not like arguing. Like, I think strategy is an important piece, but one of the things I know I try to do with all my teams is if you're asked to do something, whether it's from me or somebody else in the marketing team, and you don't know the why behind it, you should be asking why.
Yeah.
Because maybe what they're asking you to do is not really the best way to do it. And I think that's what you're getting at. So we could choose a different word, but strategy's fine. To me, it feels like it reduces what strategy means, because I think that's a little more proactive.
One person's strategy is another person's tactic, to paraphrase the old expression. So I guess you could look at it however you want to. I think though you're absolutely right in the sense that any action should be considered and understood and the context properly scoped out. And yeah, even if it is a question of, I mean, yeah, I barely can imagine this happening, but here's a list, send an email. You could at least be saying, well, what is this list? Is it compliant? Is it actually the right audience for the email that we're looking at? Could we do a different segmentation? And building out from that, obviously asking those questions just in more detail. How are we segmenting this? Are we doing any personalization? Are we creating different versions for different audiences? Where are we sourcing the prospects? What is the approach to that? And obviously that's what takes you up the maturity curve or whatever, however you want to express that, and ultimately gets you to a point where way ahead of ever thinking of sending an email or setting a paid digital campaign running or what have you. You've got all of that thinking, and it's all interlocking. Certainly, we guide clients on campaign strategy and planning and interlocks and frameworks and all those kinds of things, so that by the time you actually get down to the tactic, which is the lowest or end point of execution, it's by no means a random act of marketing. It's a very specific thing that's taking place, backed by considerable thinking that goes behind that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, no one wants to diminish the use of strategy or the opportunity to be seen as more strategic by any stretch. But, there's entering new markets strategy, there's compliance and GDPR strategy. Like there's all kinds of things around, again, you said the old adage, one person's strategy is another's tactic, et cetera.
Right.
So, but yeah, that clarity I think is super, super helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, without having seen the details of the maturity model, if I understand it right, you've got sort of 5 dimensions of what's needed for marketing ops. And then within each of those 5, some sort of scale of maturity. So I assume then, one could be well towards strategic in one of those dimensions, but maybe more tactical in another, and so on. I assume there's at least some correlation, right? If you're strategic in one or more than one, you're going to be further along in the others. One of the questions I always run into, and I think it's interesting, this is where I would love to have Naomi on as well, because I think Mike and I both have most of our experiences at very different size and stage of companies, and Naomi's is sort of in between or a little different as well. How well do you think that model applies across different size and stage of companies or industries, or B2B versus B2C?
Sure. Well, Forrester, we certainly tend to skew towards the enterprise level. That's just where our client base sits, and we're at that kind of enterprise end of the scale, if you like. That said, I don't see there's any reason that it doesn't apply across the board. Clearly, as you come down the scale to mid-market and through to maybe scale up and startup and so on, the complexity diminishes. And so some of the concepts maybe aren't so applicable. But really, if you've got 2 people working on something together, you need collaboration and coordination, and so that creates its complexity. And when I was doing the podcast that I was co-hosting, we spoke to plenty of marketing operations leaders of mid-market businesses that were not huge by any any count, but the complexity is not inconsiderable. There's just so many moving parts. Everybody's trying to do so many different things. And so I think the applicability in terms of, thinking strategically, looking for how to do that, making that contribution as a marketing operations professional or team, applies just as much. And it's just a matter of maybe not overreaching, but certainly trying to make sure that you're off that base level to be on a journey towards that higher levels of maturity.
Hey everyone, Mike Rizzo here, CEO of MarketingOps.com and co-host of OpsCast.
I've got a little secret to share with you, something that's been one of the best kept perks of our community until now. At marketingops.com, we've built a hiring program that's changing the game for marketing operations recruitment, and we're finally sharing it with the world. Our community is over 22,000 strong, and within that, we have over 4,400 members who are actively and passively seeking new opportunities. These are seasoned professionals with skills and experience spanning platforms like HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, and so much more. Plus, we can help you fine-tune your outreach, targeting exactly the right candidates by region, years of experience, seniority level, or even agency experience. But here's the real cherry on top. When you hire through our program, your new team member gets a free membership or a virtual ticket to our annual conference. From day one, they're not just stepping into a new role, they're getting access to the training, networking, and support they need to hit the ground running. So if you're ready to unlock this incredible opportunity, it's time to let this secret out. Visit marketingops.com and find your next star teammate today. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep optimizing.
I think so that makes sense, knowing what I know about Forrester and the types of clients you typically have. Okay, so let's kind of turn this a little bit into, you've got this model, and I assume you've done some work with some clients and things like that to assess or help them to apply it to their business. What are you seeing in the kind of current state? Like, where are people along the different dimensions of maturity, and are you seeing any trends related to that coming out of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly see all sorts of different levels, and even with the clients that we work with, and like I say, at the larger end of the scale, there's all sorts of different levels, and as you say, in different areas, different achievements across those different aspects. And the reason that you would become a Forrester client is because you need support across those things, and that's what we're there to do, and that's what creates the kind of the variety. I think what we do see in terms of the businesses that we work with and what's out there are the two things that I think you guys talk about all the time on the podcast. So the first is thinking in terms of that strategic element. We certainly see marketing operations becoming increasingly strategic. It's becoming much more embedded, and going back to what I was saying, executive support and those kinds of things. We definitely see that. In fact, in a survey from 2021, we saw 72% of the businesses that we surveyed have a chief of staff to the CMO, which, as I say, is a topic that you've discussed.
I was make sure I didn't mishear that. 72%.
Yeah. Now,
Wow.
Don't get me wrong, that sounds high, and so that reflects our client base, but nonetheless, at that end of the scale, that is what we're seeing in terms of the prevalence of that role. And of those, 85% of those chiefs of staff are the head of marketing operations. So that embracing of strategy and if you like, elevation of that position is real and happening, and so that's definitely a direction of travel. And then the other piece of course is revenue operations and the growth of that term and function. And certainly at Forrester, we are heading in that direction as well. We'll be announcing some changes to our services that will much more reflect that direction of travel towards revenue operations. And the key thing there is not that that's it for marketing operations. We see plenty of marketing operations functions and positions. In fact, again, across our client base. We see something like 5% of our clients have got a revenue type job title. So there's plenty of other sales and marketing ops people still out there, but it's the direction of travel, and it speaks to that cross-functional collaboration and creating a revenue ecosystem across the business. Whether you've got a single function or whether it's multiple functions, it's the totality that's important, rather than the organizational layout, if you like. So yeah, those are certainly two key areas where we see the profession going.
That's incredible. I felt like strangely validated, like through at least 2 or 3 of those
Right.
comments that you were making just now. Like, I felt like we as a community, Michael, Naomi, everybody, we're here, we are, we're talking, like, it feels like chief of staff, it feels like CMO ops, it feels like we're coming up with all these things, and here you are saying, of the folks that we're talking to, a huge percentage of them are actually in a chief of staff role, and the majority of those are from a marketing ops background. I was like, wow, that is incredibly validating. On top of that, here we are, folks. Simon said that we talk about things regularly on our show, which means Simon's listening. So I feel pretty validated by that too.
Indeed.
Which is pretty cool. So anyway, I'm all like gushing over here. Like, this is cool. So what, I'm excited about this Rev Ops stuff that's happening. I think I have mixed emotions about it in general. Part of it is that, so many of us have just been seeing that it's just predominantly just a sales operations sort of discussion.
Right.
And I'm hoping that starts to change a little bit. But then, so sort of 2 parts. Like, one, do you feel that that's why Forrester is going to try to potentially take a different stance on this and try to help maybe correct, at least from your perspective, a little bit of what they're seeing in the market? Or just maybe if it's not Forrester's opinion and it's just yours, whichever. And then the other one is go to market ops. Like, what's the deal there?
Right. Right.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah. Well, I should make clear my opinion and Forrester's are indistinguishable, just for the record.
Okay. All right. Well, just to be fair.
I should say that nothing that we put out is anything other than, kind of very deeply thought through, sometimes almost comically. And, we spent a lot of time thinking about, should we go with this? Should we call it revenue operations? People are out there calling it, or calling themselves revenue operations, but it's really just sales operations. But ultimately, we've come down on, no, it should be called revenue operations. That's what it is. It is the operations pertaining to the revenue ecosystem within the business. So we're going to, put our arms around that, and not that even we're so so highly thinking of our own opinion to suggest that everyone's going to say, oh well, now Forrester have said it, that's we better get on board with that. Nonetheless, if we can steer things in a certain direction whereby we agree that revenue operations is the totality of the revenue ecosystem, and it encompasses all of that, and it's more than just one aspect of that, then that sums that up. And so I think that's what we're trying to do with that, and just talk about it in those wider terms.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Go if you.
Well, I was just going to speak to the go to market piece, but I don't know whether you want to.
No, go ahead. No, I have a separate question. So
right.
Go for it.
So just coming back on the go-to-market operations, I need to be super careful here because I have a client who literally is just adopted that term, and it makes perfect sense in actual fact, because what they're doing is saying, okay, we've got sales operations, and they're continuing to do the classic sales operations stuff, but meanwhile, our marketing operations, it feels like it's actually a bit more than just marketing, because I think what they're doing is incorporating a little bit of the sort of customer success aspect, maybe some elements of the market sizing and total addressable market, those bits. So it's a little bit more than just marketing operations. So that's where the go-to-market aspect comes in, I think. So it again, it's a part of that wider Rev Ops ecosystem, and as long as there's alignment across the totality of it within every organization, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting distinction. I like that. The question I was going to get to, and this is getting back to revenue operations, feels like it tends to be driven more out of sales. And in fact, no data to back this up. Maybe you do, Simon, but it feels like what I keep hearing about is revenue operations includes sales ops, marketing ops, maybe customer success ops as well.
Yeah.
Tends to roll up from a reporting structure to someone who is either by background or title or role more of a sales leadership one, as opposed to marketing or even a CEO, whatever. Do you have a perspective on what you think what makes the most sense for that? I know, I personally don't think it should roll up to sales or marketing leadership, but
Right.
I don't think most places do that.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of actual stats, I must admit I don't think we do, and so that's interesting. We should try and make sure that we've got some figures around that. So I did an anecdotal study probably a couple of years ago now, where I just literally looked at some job ads, some heads of Rev Ops job ads, like VP, director, whatever, and I think I found that 6 or 7 out of 10 it was really sales ops. So that was my super anecdotal market survey at the time. I'm not sure that's changed dramatically. The key thing from our perspective at Forrester, though, is simply we're not saying it should be a single function. That's not what we're saying. So in a sense, we have less of a position on, should it roll up to marketing or sales or whoever. I mean, maybe refuting what I said a minute ago. Personally, I do like the idea of Rev Ops rolling up to a COO, but it has to be a very singular set of circumstances in terms of the individuals and the organization and so on. And that's really the wider point, is it comes down to the nature of the organization. So if you're a startup or a scale up, you're probably in a position where you can build a true integrated Rev Ops function from day one, have that roll up, wherever makes sense for that business. And that's going to work fine. If you're a more established business and you've got sales ops and you've got marketing ops and so on, trying to put those together and then figure out who's it going to report to is possibly going to work less well. And, in the future, it might even be interesting to see, will we see Rev Ops functions get split back out as an organization gets bigger? And it's like, it no longer makes sense. I suppose I would like to think that wouldn't happen, but maybe
we've had a guest on who described that kind of scenario, going from separate functions coming together as Rev Ops across them, and then getting bigger, and then having to break it out again because of the nature of the business. The large, in this case, a very large international company.
Well, that would, that does seem a little bit like a de-evolution, but at the same time, that's where the business possibly needed to go. And were that to happen, or even if you were to contemplate creating a unified Rev Ops function and then decide not to, the critical point is just to make sure you recognize the ecosystem, the alignment that needs to go into that. Because, if we think about some of the problems that arise, it's sales determining their target account list. Meanwhile, marketing have come up with the total addressable market and they don't match. And obviously that's ridiculous. And so that's the kind of thing that just needs to not happen, so that everyone agrees, who are we trying to sell our stuff to?
Yeah. Mike, did you have any additional questions on the Rev Ops go-to-market ops? Because I want to kind of go back to the chief of staff stuff for a second and the data that Simon talked about. But if you have more, I can hold.
No, I think what I hear from you is A, super helpful, and then B, there's The answer is it depends. It's just like our favorite. It's our favorite thing to say in marketing operations. Like, can I send that email? Well, it depends. Can I build a Rev Ops function? It depends. What's your organization structure look like? And I think that's okay. It's frustrating that organizations and leadership, we all, as humans, we all want the the silver, solution,
Right.
to like, how do we just tell me how to do it? And the reality is no, it depends. So
I always try and avoid saying it depends because it's almost a cliche. And in actual fact, I have this idea that no good question has any answer other than it depends. Because if the answer isn't it depends, it's either a really obvious question or just a really boring question, maybe. So you need to avoid saying it depends because it's like, yeah, I know it depends. What does it depend on? And then that's where it starts getting interesting.
Yeah,
I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that, and I always think what it is. It's there's not always a right. There's not in those really interesting questions. There's usually not a right answer. There are points of view and opinions.
Yeah,
and they're based on trade-offs, right? And and to me, all these really big questions, it's about trade-offs and which means that every organization will have different levels of, say, risk tolerance. So, I've been at organizations before where, had the CEO come and say, we want to share our customer list with this firm that's, done us a solid. And I had to push back. And ultimately it was more of a risk reward or risk decision. It was a compliance thing, which means that if we got in trouble, right, then that would be something that's the risk we take on. Are we willing to take on that risk and the potential downside? We end up not doing it, just for the record, but
just in case the data protection authorities are listening.
Well, but my point is a lot of things come down to not absolutes. And that's the thing that makes it hard. I actually have I don't know that I've codified it in some sort of theory, but I think that's part of why revenue operations tends to lean more towards sales ops is kind of the leader in that versus marketing ops, because the sense I have is sales is much more binary, right? There is, you either won a deal, you didn't win a deal. You met your quota, you didn't meet your quota. Whereas marketing is a little harder to put in that kind of look. If wasn't a campaign effective? Well, the answer is not a straightforward yes or no. It's if you're doing it right, you should be looking at sort of a basket of metrics and evaluating it in total across that. It's not as straightforward. And I think that it's part of why marketers have a internal messaging problem in a lot of places.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure. You could generate a certain level of demand that it might not have been everything you wanted, but if it got close, then it's not a failure. Whereas if you came second in the pitch but you didn't get it, it's like that wasn't winning,
right?
Which as you say creates a much more binary mindset, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it is easier for most people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to go back to the research. You said 72% of your, obviously like leans towards enterprise, I guess. Research 72% have or are thinking about a chief of staff for the head of marketing. Is that number right?
Yeah.
And then actually, I was surprised that only 80% or 80% of those included marketing ops under that function. So that was a little 85. Still, I would have expected that to be almost all. So
sure.
I'm curious. I'd be curious to know where is that? Like, is it separately directly reporting to the head of marketing?
Well, yeah. I mean, what that's saying is that you've got a chief of staff and a head of marketing operations, and we're working on some research in this area to try and outline what these roles and functions look like. And one of the questions we've asked ourselves is, wait, if you've got a chief of staff, what are they doing or maybe what are they not doing that a head of marketing operations is doing if there is a separate head of marketing operations. And typically what that comes down to in broad terms is a chief of staff will be doing the planning, the coordination, aspects of strategizing and bringing everything together, budgets perhaps, whereas a head of marketing operations will remain focused on the tech, data governance, execution in some regards, and some measurement and analytics at the actual a kind of a slightly lower doing it kind of level, whereas the chief of staff will be going across marketing and the wider organization to get the inputs and the stakeholder support and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how that breaks out. I'm working with at least one client that I can think of where there is a chief of staff, and in fact I think one or more of the heads of directors of marketing operations reports into that chief of staff. So that's it's a very large international business, and that's the kind of complexity that they have.
Okay, so now that's helpful. What I think you've touched on this a little bit, but see if we can get it a little more specifically for those chief of staff type roles. So, and I'm thinking about this for people who are in our audience who maybe have an aspiration to do, because one of the struggles I think we all deal with in marketing ops is there's not necessarily a clear path after the director, maybe even, and there's not many VP level roles for marketing ops. So chief of staff seems to me to be a fairly natural one, but I think includes the need to have some amount of skills and experience that are typically outside of what marketing ops does. What do you see those being, and if you have any suggestions on how people could start to accumulate some of that experience?
Experience to move into a
chief of
MOPS
staff
role,
from a head of MOPS to
I didn't catch that.
chief of staff.
Thank
you, Siri.
Does that
Thank you, Siri.
all the time.
So the point I should have made is that where you've got that chief of staff and head of marketing operations in one person, what that means is that the head of marketing operations is performing that coordination role across the marketing function, so across the marketing leadership team. And the critical thing is, particularly around planning and coordination and often budgets and maybe even aspects of personnel and staffing and so on, but crucially not doing those things. So the head of marketing operations or the chief of staff will not come up with the marketing plan or the campaign plan, but what they will do is go to the head of demand gen, digital, whoever else, and say, what are your plans? Well, here is the strategy. Here are the objectives. Please create a plan that rolls up to that, and then put it all together. So from the point of view of a marketing operation, head of marketing operations, who is looking to whether they ever go into a chief of staff role with that job title or become, the chief of staff / head of marketing operations, or whether they just become, a VP of marketing operations. It's that mindset. And again, this needs to come down somewhat from the CMO as well as working up into it. But thinking in those terms, coordination, like I say, alignment, bringing everything together. That's the sort of the mindset that you need to have to be at the absolute top of the game. So,
if I said, to summarize, that you need to have experience or ability to show strategic planning and how to. Well, strategic thinking almost, right? And how to coordinate with other senior leaders and influence.
Yeah, and that's crucial. It goes outside of marketing for sure. So again, this is where those relationships with sales ops, if that exists, is crucial, and other executive leadership, because you need to be probably coordinating, budgets and making sure that that's aligned with finance. From a tech perspective, making sure that the revenue technology is aligned and fitting in with the wider enterprise environment. So having all of those relationships and thinking in those terms, and the true chief of staff will be filtering for the CMO or for their boss, and bringing to the table those things that they need to be looking at, and most likely coordinating around executive leadership meetings, board meetings, contributing board papers, that kind of thing, compiling those. So making sure that you're involved in that kind of process. So most likely, and I would certainly expect this to be the case, if the CMO is going to an executive leadership meeting or a board meeting with a pack of marketing results, then quite likely marketing operations is contributing to that. And so it's just a matter of making sure that you are, and trying to make sure that you're really involved in the final product and not just some input that then gets manipulated into something else. Try and really be creating the final slide or whatever that's going into that into that set for that audience.
No, all of this is really interesting. I know we're coming up on time here, so I just wanted to try to squeeze this in a little bit. So, do you like? There's this thing that I talk about with folks all the time. It's this strange role that you have in marketing operations, where maybe strange isn't the right word for it, opportunistic role that you have in marketing ops, where you just have a purview of the landscape of technology and the data flowing through all of it. It's highly unique. It just doesn't really, no one else has that lens. And you're only a couple pieces of information away from knowing really how the entire business works. Like you show me the payroll system and then a couple other things. And now I really have this perspective of our organization that's equivalent to that of, your executives, right? Your CEO for that matter. Yeah. And so the conversation in the talk track is what is the responsibility of the future executive and the CMO for that matter? Is it going to come from, we just talked about chief of staff? Yes, that's great. And I think maybe that is the C-suite that we reach in this function, because it's the most optimal for our particular skills and aligning all these people, process, and technology. But today, I don't know who has the responsibility of saying, hey, I need to enter a new market and here's my business model. What are the things that I need to have in place in order to do that? It's not a CTO's job. It's not a CIO's job. It's barely a CMO's job. And the COO certainly doesn't have that function. And so the closest that I can think of is it's the CEO's responsibility to figure out who should just now go figure out the rest. So the question is what's to become of this startup, scale up? You're moving into growth markets. Who's going to tell people what to? Well, maybe it's Forrester. Forrester's going to tell them what to do. So I teed you up. It's Forrester.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. Nice, easy answer. I certainly agree with you that marketing operations is very well, if not uniquely positioned, with a perspective across obviously marketing, in terms of what's going on and what's happening, and all the different moving parts, and beyond that as well, in terms of, as I say, all those other interconnects and interlocks and how that's working. So when a new initiative comes along, ideally, marketing operations is certainly a first port of call, and a chief of staff, even more so, perhaps. All that said, I wouldn't want to overstate it. I wouldn't want marketing operations to overreach. And anything is a team effort, and it's just that if an organization is smart and they've got a good marketing operations or Rev Ops function or a chief of staff in that position, then that person should be in that conversation, because they're going to have that perspective across audiences and the ability to execute and the other elements that are going to go into something, and so that's where again that strategic involvement comes in. I wouldn't want to suggest that only a head of marketing operations could do that, but it's definitely a huge contribution to be made for sure.
Yeah. No,
Definitely.
appreciate your perspective for sure.
Yeah. Well, as Mike alluded to, we are probably we're kind of running out of time. I wish we could continue.
Yeah.
I think we could carry on. I feel like at end every episode is like, I think we could carry on for another 30 minutes or so. But we do need to be respectful. Yeah, he's going to, Simon, I think you're going to switch from tea to a pint maybe next. I don't.
You're not very far off the truth.
Well, thank you for staying late. This has been a fun conversation. If folks want to keep up with you or what's going to happen at Forrester, what's the way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter. I put out the odd thing if I find something interesting. So I'm Marketing Ops Guy. But other than that, certainly very happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. You should be able to easily. And what I also do on LinkedIn, and this is going to sound like a blatant Forrester plug. I'm trying to position it as a public service announcement. I do this little monthly, I call it Simon's unofficial Forrester marketing operations roundup. Basically, I pull together all of our research that's been published that month. That's available to clients, but also all of our blog posts, any webinars that we've done. We have a podcast that frequently has episodes relevant to marketing operations and B2B marketing. So look out for that. And if you're working in this space, that could well be useful, because I got to say, we don't always make it as easy as I think we should to find some of our stuff, and there's some good stuff out there. So take a look at that if that's of interest.
I've personally found those quite helpful the last time I was doing some digging on some things. So we appreciate it.
We'll take it as a PSA for sure. So, thank you, Simon.
Simon,
thank you so much. Enjoyed it. Mike, thank you as always. And thanks to all our listeners and our audience. And appreciate you sticking with us, and look forward to our next episode. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.